Good afternoon. I'm Ron Moore, living in Jacksonville, photographer local here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how I process things and do things in my way. Not necessarily always the right way. Everybody has different ways of doing it. So first thing I'd like to talk about is some of the films that we used to use. Some of us remember the 35mm film. Then we have the next size up. Of course, we have color 35mm. The next size up is 120 film, this size here. And then we have the large format, like this one. This is 4x5, and I use that in this camera here, and it's held in place with a film holder. There's film inside of here. You put that in the camera, you pull this out. This is already exposed, so we don't have to worry about it. And then you'll take your picture, you'll compose it on the ground glass in the back here. I'll get into that in just a minute. So that's the basic film size that we use. Now, there's different ways to develop each one of these. The 35mm one, we would probably use an old tank like this. When it comes to doing the 120, I use the same sort of tank, only it's twice as big, because then I put 2 rolls in. But you go through the same process. Now, in the 4x5, there's several different ways to do that. I first learned how to do it by following a book I got about Ansel Adams and how he did things, because they didn't have a lot of this other stuff, I guess, at the time. So you start out, you put your film, and this is all, again, in total darkness. So you're feeling around as you're doing. You'll put 5 or 6 of these in your developer, put it in, and then you'll bring them up and leaf them without scratching the other piece underneath it with the corner there. And just keep going over and over and over again, probably for about 6 or 7 minutes, depending on your temperature and the film speed and all. Then when you get it done there, you put it in here. You go through the same process. That stops the developer. That's what it's called, a stop. This is usually a 30-second one. Then you put it in the fixer, clearing agent, and that takes the chemicals out of that are in the emulsion and makes it neutral. Sometimes I don't want to mix up all these chemicals for one piece of film. So I got a little tube here. Down at the hardware store, you get a little PVC pipe, and there's a cap that goes in here too. And in the dark, you put this in, and or put the fluid in there, your developer or whatever, put the cap on, and you just roll it like that back and forth. And that makes even development across the face of the film. One of the most even ways you can develop.
Is that your little trick? Did you come up with that? Or is
no, I just followed somebody else's advice.
That's so cool.
That's called a Zone 6 camera. That's the company that makes it, Zone 6. And it's a small place in Newfane, Vermont that makes these. They used to. Calumet has since bought them out. But there's no lens in here, but I would have a lens here, and then you focus on the screen on the back here. Your image will come through the lens, and it'll be, this is the size of your negative, and you'll be able to focus on that. You can get real sharp pictures that way. And some people even use a little magnifier to check the sharpness. And then you can adjust up and down, back and forth. This thing swings in all different directions to change your perspective and things like that. And you have to use excuse me, a dark cloth with this, because the light, the normal sunlight, will make it so you can't see what's on the ground glass. So you put that up there. It gets hot in there sometimes, and that's why you always have the white side out to help reflect the heat.
So this isn't like a digital camera where you're like taking 20 pictures like you do, like all this, get it perfect.
This is a half-hour picture taker.
That's so cool.
You know, and it can be very frustrating to your partner if you're traveling around. What are you doing? You know, well, I'm composing my one great picture, you know, and it may come out, it may not. So I've never had an automatic camera that makes my settings for me, the aperture and the speed and all that sort of stuff. I do it all myself. And that's how I learned when I started doing large format. I got to do it myself because they don't make these cameras with automatic stuff on them. Go ahead.
When digital photography first came out, did you have some adjustment to make? It seems
Well,
like
it's been out for a long time before I even got started with it, because I refused to accept it for a long time.
Right.
So,
And then how did you learn the details?
necessity.
Yeah.
And then I took some classes. Now this is the camera I use. I got it by accident more than anything else because I don't know a lot about digital cameras. But it worked out fine. It's a Canon 5D Mark II. And it'll take lots of pictures. It's got a lot of things you can do on it. You can change your white balances to match the type of light that's outside. Now let me turn it on here. And then it'll tell you all your settings across there. And then when you go to the menu, you can change your exposure compensation. You can change the light and the dark. So anyway, you can do quite a bit with this camera, and it'll hold maybe 500 pictures on a card. I have a flash. I used it last night because it was getting dark, and that worked out pretty good. And a remote release. So when I put it in the tripod, I can sit there and wait for the things to get just right, and I can trigger it without touching the camera. With this camera and my 2 1/4 square, and 90% of this time I use a tripod, because that's the best way you can have to ever get a sharp picture. When you're hand holding things, unless you're shooting an awful fast speed, you're going to get a little bit of blur, and or you may lose your depth of field because you're having to open it up more to get faster speed. You had a question about matting and framing and all. I found out when I first started out, I got a huge lesson from a frame shop. They charge a lot, and that was the whole thing right there. I couldn't afford to have my stuff framed, so I figured I can learn how to frame and mat and mount. So on like this picture, you can go to some place like Central Art, you can buy a mat board. I buy it by the case. And this is going to take 2 pieces of mat board, and then you'll have a lot left over of smaller sizes you can use in other pictures. And I take and mount this picture on the bottom mat using heat tack. It's like a paper that you heat up, dry mount, put it in the dry mount press, you heat it up to 180 degrees, I think it is, and then it's in a press. And it melts the glue on there, and it sticks the picture right to the paper, and it's archival. It won't go bad on you later. Then the top mat goes, I leave a space around. I like this size space for these sizes of pictures for 2 reasons. One is proportionately, I think, a good size. Secondly, if you have a little off, it's easy to move things around a little bit and still stay okay without having to cut a new board. If you get real close to the edge, which a lot of people do, those who have patience, if you're off a little bit, then it shows up a lot more.
How do you cut it? Is there a special mat cutter?
Yeah, I got a mat cutter that'll handle 32 by 40 sheets. It's a Logan, and I don't remember the name of it. It's got a squaring arm on it, and as long as you keep changing your blades, which is key, you won't get any ragged edges. If you don't change your blades often enough, every cut you make is going to have a little fuzzy edge on it, and that sort of detracts away from things. Anyway, that was my big lesson. I don't go to frame shops. I cannot afford to go to frame shops. I get my frames online at American Frame, and I got, well, this one here from American Frame. They have pages in their catalog of different kinds, wood and metal. I prefer metal frames because I can put them together myself very easily. Well, if there's no other questions, you shut off your camera.